Reprise de débat. Resuming. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak in support of Bill C-81, an act to ensure a barrier-free Canada. With this bill, our government is fulfilling our commitment to guarantee the full and equal participation of all persons, especially persons with disabilities, in society. The consultation previous to the tabling of this legislation was vast, Madam Speaker, an important part of our government's commitment to hear from Canadians on issues that affect them. More than 6,000 Canadians participated in various ways. We held 18 public engagement sessions, 9 roundtables, a national youth forum, and an online questionnaire. The principle, nothing about us without us, was embraced for these Accessible Canada consultations, which asked all Canadians to think about what accessibility means to them and what it can mean for their communities. The consultations were the most inclusive and accessible for persons with disabilities in Canada's history. These consultations informed the legislation that is before us today, the Accessible Canada Act, which will work to remove barriers for persons with disabilities in numerous ways, Madam Speaker. Among other things, it will create the role of a Chief Accessibility Officer. It will reinstate the Disability Advisory Committee, which had been dismantled by the previous government, and it will enhance the Opportunities Fund by adding $40 million per year, which will fund employers to hire persons with disabilities and provide the framework to create more accessible environments. In total, our government will pledge $290 million over the next 6 years to implement this important legislation. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to take a step back from the current legislation and focus locally on my riding of Parkdale High Park. This summer, I hosted a town hall in my riding to hear from my constituents regarding the Accessible Canada Act. I was joined by 8 panelists with various backgrounds and expertise, including David Lepofsky, Chair of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, and a law professor at the University of Toronto and at Osgoode Hall. Renu Mandani, the Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and Jeff Adams, a Paralympian gold medalist and 6-time champion in wheelchair sports. The town hall was to explain this new legislation and to take questions on it from my constituents, but it was an educational experience, Madam Speaker, not only for the individuals in attendance at the town hall, but also for me. We set out to organize this town hall with the goal of ensuring that it was completely accessible for all persons with disabilities. My staff and I attempted to take into account the numerous and varied barriers that might affect the ability for a person with a disability to participate meaningfully in the meeting. However, many were brought to our attention that we did not anticipate. For instance, we sent out an email, Madam Chair, to constituents informing them of the upcoming town hall with a poster enclosed as a PDF attachment, something I think many members in this House might have done. But we quickly learned that the document we created was not accessible for those with a visual impairment. The poster needed to be in a format where a screen reader could interpret the text, such as text contained within the body of an email, not as an attachment poster, so that screen reading technology could communicate that material to those who are visually impaired. We also made sure to bring a sign language interpreter to the town hall, so that those with a hearing impairment could understand and participate in the discussion. Once again, we found that some people are hearing impaired but do not understand or know sign language. So to ensure that the town hall was as inclusive as possible, we ensured to also implement on-site live captioning for those who are hearing impaired but who do not understand sign language. Finally, we resolved to host the town hall in a fully accessible building that was also large enough to accommodate all of the guests who wished to attend the town hall. This meant that there were fewer buildings to choose from in my riding, but in the end we hosted the event at the Swansea Town Hall, a level and spacious venue that was fully accessible. Thank you to Swansea Town Hall for hosting us. But Madam Speaker, the experience of organizing the Town Hall cemented my view about how important it is to have this piece of legislation move actively forward. As a government, as a parliament, we must ensure that we establish a framework for a truly inclusive Canada, and that as many barriers to access are removed for individuals with disabilities as possible. I was fortunate to receive important feedback that evening from my constituents, from persons with disabilities, and from relevant experts, which will contribute to this bill and make it even stronger. This is the start of a very important conversation about accessibility in Canada, and one which I would state is long overdue, Madam Speaker. But I'm happy to report that this conversation is already bearing fruit. Not less than 4 weeks after holding my town hall, I was honoured to host the Prime Minister in my riding for the Bloor Street West Ukrainian Festival and the Roncesvalles Polish Festival, both the largest of their kind in North America. Over 500,000 people visit these two festivals over the course of the weekend, Madam Speaker. At the opening ceremonies of both festivals, I brought a sign language interpreter up onto the stage to provide live simultaneous sign language interpretation for both my and the Prime Minister's remarks. He was a bit more excited about translating the Prime Minister's remarks, Madam Speaker, truth be told. But this was a first for both festivals. Now, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, what I want to talk to specifically now is about the legislation itself. It represents the single biggest development in federal access health legislation in 30 years, since the Charter of Rights and Freedoms itself came into force. This new legislation is the cornerstone of our government's plan for the progressive realization of a barrier-free Canada. Second, Bill C-81 will provide accessibility standards for entities to achieve and maintain an ongoing monitoring system to ensure that Canadians see results and to hold organizations accountable. Troisièmement, environ 53 millions de dollars sur...
Third, millions of dollars to make the built environment more accessible. This strategy, Madam Speaker, will be a roadmap to respecting our obligations towards Canadians with disabilities, but also to simply make life easier for them. We will have a coordinated approach to implement the strategy within government. This objective will be achieved through an accessibility center which will ensure leadership and monitoring in our trying to make the environment more accessible to Canadians.
It will expand the existing Opportunities Fund for Persons with Disabilities, also known as the OF Fund, Madam Speaker, to better support activities in two areas. The first area will improve matching services that connect employers and persons with disabilities. While the Opportunities Fund helps persons with disabilities develop the skills and knowledge they require to meet the needs of today's economy, more can be done to connect such individuals with employers with available jobs. The second area will enhance businesses' efforts to develop effective recruitment and retention strategies. The Opportunities Fund will work with these employers by supporting their efforts to create inclusive workspaces and to develop and implement in-house strategies to effectively recruit, accommodate, and retain persons with disabilities. This fund will have both a national stream and a regional stream, totaling nearly $40 million per year in funding, Madam Speaker. This will better support employers who have a demonstrated commitment to hiring persons with disabilities, but who need support to find the right match and to create workplaces that allow employees with disabilities to reach their full potential. Fifth, as I alluded to earlier, Madam Speaker, we are also reinstating the Disability Advisory Committee, which is vital to ensuring that the Canada Revenue Agency connects with a wide range of stakeholders and takes their views into account as we administer tax measures for people with disabilities. The committee's mandate is to provide advice to the Minister of National Revenue and the Commissioner of the Canada Revenue Agency on the administration and interpretation of the laws and programs related to disability tax measures administered by the CRA. This legislation will guarantee that the needs and expectations of the disability community are taken into consideration. The committee also advises the CRA on how it can better inform persons with disabilities and various stakeholders about tax measures and important administrative changes. Moreover, it is tasked with reviewing the CRA's administrative practices and making recommendations on how we can enhance the quality of our services for persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, those 6 components make for a comprehensive suite of items that will work collectively toward the progressive realization of a barrier-free Canada. Most importantly, I will conclude where I commenced. Our entire approach to the development of this legislation has been informed by one fundamental principle, Madam Speaker: nothing about us without us. The practice of paternalistic thinking that the government knows best and what is appropriate for persons with disabilities is gone. In its place is a new, modern 2018 approach to legislating, where the government listens and actively solicits the input, feedback, advice, and ideas from persons with disabilities about how best to address their needs. This legislation is the first step in that process, and it's one that is long overdue. I urge everyone to take a nonpartisan approach to this important legislation and to support it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.